Ah, it's so good to be with nurses. It's so good to be with nurses because I can relax, you know. I can feel at home and I can feel that renewal of joy that I felt, when we first started the Louisa Hope Fund for Nurses at Prince of Wales. So nurses really, through that whole siege, post-siege period, has been my very happy place because it's just brought me joy. With the duration of the inquest season that we went through after the siege, being able to divert off from that and to become involved in the fundraising at Prince of Wales Hospital Foundation for the nurses has just made me so happy to be doing something normal and positive and for actually seeing how we can get the good out of what happened that awful day. Now, it's everybody knows I was a patient at Prince of Wales because of the siege in the Lindt café. And I always have to pause and say that that day in the cafe, whilst I was in the cafe with my mother, and all of you were on the outside, I very much feel that it was a situation that happened to all of us. Were many of you in Sydney at the time? Any of you in Sydney? Yeah, perhaps. And if you were interstate or even overseas, did you have family and friends that you thought of? And maybe you rang and you checked on them and you thought about what has happened to them and are they okay? And once you sorted out who you didn't know and who could or couldn't have been in that cafe at that time, perhaps you then turned your heart to the people who were in the cafe. And I know that lots of you did because lots of you have told me that you've thought of us and prayed for us through that time, and I thank you very much for that. It was an ordeal. There's no two ways about it. I could talk to you for hours about it, actually, but tonight's not for that. Suffice to say that it was horrendous and terrifying, yes. It was also a whole lot of other things as well. And then, of course, the process of going through the inquest, which took over 18 months. So it's been a long time. And here I sit still with half a hole in my foot. And tragic shoes, can't wear nice shoes anymore, so and you might not think that's a big deal, but it mattered to me in the room actually, when right at the end, when all my fellow hostages had disappeared, and there was just what I thought was at that stage, Tori Johnson and my mother and myself in the room, and the gunman was enraged and crazy. He had shot Tori, which I actually didn't think he was going to do, but he did. And the police came in. All day we had waited for the police to come, and they came with such force and power. The room was filled with smoke and colours and light, and I was standing 1 minute and on the floor the next. And I remember so vividly, it was all going on like crazy. I had my eyes closed, my eyes covered, and I thought to myself, my goodness, we've survived this whole day, but we're going to die right now. It was so terrifying, the ending. And at the same time, I thought to myself, well, I'm going to die here, I might as well watch. So I took my hands down and I was watching what was happening, and it was just nuts, crazy. Everything that you imagined it was, if you saw it on television, it was like that, only 100 times worse. And I was looking down, I could see my foot. The next minute I noticed that the straps from my very favourite red shoes were missing. And I'm like, oh no, what's happened to my shoes? How am I going to get, I'm going to die any minute. And I'm thinking, how am I going to get my shoes fixed? And I was thinking all of this about my shoes, right? And the next minute, the most searing, piercing pain. And suddenly I was aware, I've been hit. I'd no sooner consciously realised that, and there were cops on top of me saying, get up, run. And I'm going, I can't, my foot. And he says, if I get you up, can you hop? And I'm like, can I hop? Right, sure I can do that, right? And I'm thinking to myself, my goodness, I have MS, and so sometimes I don't always manage to stand up straight, let alone hop, but hop I did. So I'm hopping out of the cafe, and the next minute, two big burly cops come along and take me out, and there I am, landed on the bitumen on Phillip Street. And I tell you what, the city, it was silent. There was noise and shouting and screaming and running, but the city was so deathly quiet. The next minute I'm in the ambulance and they're discussing where they're going to take me, and eventually they decided it was going to be Prince of Wales, and I was so relieved because I really like Prince of Wales actually. It's kind of like my hospital, right? You know what it's like, it's your local. So we get there to the hospital, and you'd expect that you would be expecting us, but no, what happened was the ambulance driver had to knock on the door in emergency to get let in. And I'm like, didn't they know we were coming? Apparently not. So anyway, we go in the doors through emergency, and we're greeted by the emergency nurse. And it was such a relief. I remember her so vividly. You know, friends, you always remember your nurse. And I remember her, she had beaming face and curly hair. She was just so lovely. And she said, oh, your foot. And I said, yeah, what do you think about my foot? And she said, oh, I've seen worse. And I'm like, oh my God. Because, you know, in my head, I'd lost my foot. I was never going to walk again. You can imagine, a little bit hyper. But she was so calm, and I thought, great, she's seen worse. Okay, maybe it's not going to be that bad. So there we are. They're looking at my foot, and the cops arrived. There are 2 detectives very quickly right there. And I'm talking non-stop to the police, telling them, trying to brain dump everything that I could remember of my experience over that 17 hours. And I'm talking 10 to the dozen. I'm really good at that. Anyway, the thing is, I was there in emergency, and the next minute, the emergency nurse says, oh, Louisa, we're just going to cut your clothes off. And I'm like, no cutting off my clothes. You know what it was? It was that black dress. I was wearing that perfect black dress. You know the one. It goes with everything, weddings, funerals, whatever, a night like tonight. Perfect. No, she says, I'm going to cut. And I'm arguing. I'm saying, no, you can't cut. And I'm trying to reason with this woman. No reasoning with the emergency nurse, I tell you. So I turn to the cops and I say to them, she can't do this. And they're both like, oh, whoa, and they're gone. Like, you know, where's a cop when you need them, right? So they deserted me, and so she's looking at me, I'm looking at her, and she was going to win. She had the scissors, right? So she gets my dress and she cuts, and then we're lifting my dress off, and as we lift, and my hands are covered in blood, and I'm like, oh. And what it was, of course, was that I'd been hit with shrapnel in my abdomen, and so there's blood all over me, and of course, she's looking at me with that "I told you so" look, right? So don't argue with the emergency nurse. But it's traumatic losing your clothes like that. But not only my clothes, right? She comes to my bra, and that goes off as well. Seriously, I had just bought that bra. But no arguing with her. And then that was the beginning of my journey at Prince of Wales. Journey, don't you hate that word? But, I thought I was going to be there. Maybe they'd stitch up my foot, and then I'd go home. 3 months later, actually. So those of you who know, I had orthopedics and plastic and general surgery. And so you know what it's like after you have surgery, all the doctors come round the next morning. So it was the morning after the night before. I'd gone into surgery after that night, about 7 o'clock in the morning. So it was in the early sort of mid-morning. And this lovely doctor came to me. She was so lovely. And she was very concerned. She said, Louisa, we're so sorry. The shrapnel in your abdomen was about the size of a piece of rice, both of them, and we just couldn't we tried, and I know that they tried because my innards were hurt, so much pain. We tried really hard, and she was so sincere and so worried about it, and I kind of just said to her, well, gee, doc, shame you couldn't have done a little lipo while you were down there, right? Yeah, exactly, yes, right, you'd laugh. That's what I thought she'd do. She'd laugh, we'd have a little joke, but no, she did not. She went, Louisa, and she chastised me. She said to me, this doctor, the surgeon said to me, Louisa, your fat saved your life. Yeah, right, woohoo. Oh, that's just how I felt. If I'd been able to get out of that bed and run around, I would have done it just that, applauded. She said to me that, my fat saved my life, and that if that shrapnel had actually got into my abdomen cavity, things could have been very different. And I remember thinking in that moment, my goodness, my fat saved my life. And I was just so stunned. My lovely nurse, who'd only known me a few little hours, I was only just there, she walked in, and of course, it was a bit of a scary situation, that siege, and they weren't quite sure how I was going to react, and she walked in, and she could just see that absolute gobsmacked expression on my face. And she said to Louisa, are you all right? And I said, the doctor just said, my fat saved my life. And she's standing there with me, Nurse Julie, and Nurse Julie says, she said that, and I said, yeah. And Julie was a bit of a chunky chick as well, you know. Yeah, and so we just started to laugh and laugh and laugh, and it's hurting, and I'm going, stop making me laugh. I was in agony. And then Nurse Jenny come to the door and said, what are you two laughing at? She's a skinny bit of nothing nurse, right, like this. And she's like, what are you? And no idea. But we shared that moment. In the end, I had to say, go. You know, I think it set the tone for the rest of my time in the hospital, which was amazing, really, to watch the nurses work and how they cared for me. But in that immediate moment, I thought to myself, you know, how many diets have I been on? How many diets have maybe some of you been on? How many things do we have that we assault ourselves with time after time, and then bang, there it was in that moment. The very thing I'd loathed about myself was the very thing that actually saved my life. My GP nearly passed out when I told her that story, and it's okay. I know, I'm not here for start that cult of, you know, fat saved your life or anything. Not at all. Quite the contrary. Quite the contrary. But, you know, it made me think about, and I'll just say to you to think about your life. You're here in this conference, and I could tell by what Alison Peeler said, almost told my entire speech earlier in the video there, about, you know, make change happen, and how we make change happen in our inner life and in our communal life and in your work life. And that's what the siege has done for me. You think about an event in your life that expands you. Yes, it's compromised my health. There's no two ways about that. And it has been a challenge for all of us who are involved. My mother still struggles with her health because of it. But when one comes to a situation where it's life and death, where you actually do face the very real possibility of dying that moment, it makes all of our life compress. And all that comes squeezing out is the good, or the good that you could have done, or the good that you maybe were going to do. This conference for you has been about making change happen. So it's quite timely for me to come and share with you, because I say to you that for me, after the siege, my absolute intent and life purpose is to get some good out of that circumstance, not only for myself personally, but for our whole country, because we must understand we do live in an age of terror, and it will come again. So how will we make change happen to be ready for next time? I look out at all of you, and I think of you here at this conference, how good and how easy it is to come to something like this, absorb all that amazing teaching and experience, and suck it all in, shove it all down. You know, and we get psychically fat when we come to these conferences, because we just come home going, oh, don't we? But actually, it's not what we hear or we learn, but it's what we practice. It's what we take home to practice. What change will you bring to your life personally, in your workplace, and communally? Because you see, as nurses, you are leaders in your community. I'm a firm believer that nursing is not just a career. You are called to nursing. It's something quite unique, and you are regarded within your community. We all expect clinical excellence when we go to hospital. Nothing else will do. That's the standard that our glorious universal healthcare system affords us. So we expect you to be clinically excellent, but it is that something else that comes from your humanity to your patient. When you respond with your heart to the calling that you have in your heart to do the best for that individual in that bed or in that clinic, it's that extra special something that you bring that makes all the difference to your patient, and you have the capacity. You have the capacity to bring that to your community as well. So, I feel like I have hooked up with the right people, actually, because as I have become more and more familiar with nurses beyond my patient bed, and I realise the way you are educated, the way you are trained, the standard that you are kept to in your professional setting, I have no doubt that if there's going to be a crisis, you're the people that we're going to call, right? And I also believe that you have the capacity. Now, you might be thinking, you've got no idea what I do, Louisa. You've got no idea what it's like when I go home. I'm exhausted. I've got nothing left. Yes, I understand that. But that's not true either. We all have the capacity to stretch. What's that expression? The one that goes, if you want something done, give it to a busy woman. Right. There's a few boys in the room here, but actually that's how I feel about you. If something needs to be done, you're the girls and boys who are going to do it because of that calling that's in your heart. So when I think about the future and what's going to come, I'd like you to think about the NurseWell app. What's that? Anybody know about the NurseWell app? A few? Great. The NurseWell app is our gift to you. Now, I should have a PowerPoint presentation at this time, but no, I haven't. You're just going to have to trust me. If you get out your phone, it's free. NurseWell. It's blue. You call it up, it's free. If you go to Google Store or whatever you've got for your Android thing, okay, technically challenged me. So, it's free to you. It's an app. It's been developed by research that was done at Prince of Wales Hospital. Brought to bear by nurse educators with a Louisa Hope Fund grant. Just seed money we gave them. That was then, proof of concept was proved. The NurseWell app is a gift to nurses. It helps you consider the things, all research-based, that are challenges for you. Exercise. Do you do enough exercise? How do you manage your mental health? Once you get the app on your phone, you'll see it. What do we do about the way we eat? What do we do about how we exercise? Are we spending any time for ourselves, meditating perhaps? You'll see all those things that are good for you, right? But you don't do. But this tool is a gift to you to help you to remember and be reminded. Now, I've got that NurseWell app on my phone as well, and I'm not a nurse. It's so practical in how it helps us and reminds us. And it will be growing and evolving and changing into the future. But I've decided that NurseWell app sets out a little challenge, right? It says to think about how you're eating, what's good health, what's the best way to do that. So I can't promote this NurseWell app if I don't use it myself, right? That's reasonable. So I'm going to take up that challenge personally. I'm going to think about, and I'm laying it on the line here tonight, that's scary, I tell you. I'm going to think about maybe it's time to lose a little bit of that fat that saved my life, right? It's time to let it go. So if I get to see you this time next year, hopefully you'll seem a little bit thinner. My GP will be very grateful. But what I'm saying to you about this is that this is a gift and a tool for you to help you look after you. Maybe the change that has to happen is as you give out to so many other people, you have to find the way and the time, make the space in your life to look after yourself first. I want to encourage you with that, encourage you to think about that, and encourage you to do just that. I'm going to find that time to do that exercise with my dodgy foot. But if I can do it, you can do it too. We can all do it together. So I want to thank you. I want to thank you for being the people who look after us at our hospital bed, the people who lead us in our community, and the people that are going to do just those things into the future. I believe that we have an opportunity. You've got another day left of conference. That's a really wonderful thing. But I want you to think seriously about what change can you make happen that's going to benefit you, that will in turn benefit our broader community. Thank you for letting me come and share with you this evening. It's been lovely.